Samantha, what was your favorite song out of the whole series?
What was our favorite song? I guess maybe I've got one. Probably a favorite at least.
Yeah, I love the original theme song. My voice is so fried this morning. I love the original theme song. The truly outrageous one. It gives me chills every time. And I really love Only the Beginning.
Yes.
That song rocks. And Twilight and Paris.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And Misfit songs. Yeah, so many good songs. I mean, so many.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lindsay Pierce. Another iteration of Lindsay Pierce.
This question is for the entire panel. As you have experienced over the years, Jim, in various representations, is there a part that you think you connect the most to?
What do you mean by a part?
Do you feel more connected to either the show or the comics or the dolls, or as it's gone through various interpretations of the concept of Jim, which manifestation?
Which manifestation of Jim do we most relate to?
Yes.
Basically. I mean, I don't see how I could relate to anything else except the animation series, really. I mean, at the heart of it. If I were actually writing a comic book series myself, that would be different, you know, obviously, but I'm just too much attuned to the things that I create. It's just, I guess it's just natural.
Yeah, I would say the same thing too. Although there is much love and reverence for the new imaginings that have been happening, and just all of that is so much fun to see. So there's a lot of love attached to it for me, but yeah, the original, of course.
And I'm, of course, attached to the dolls, the original dolls, and I do enjoy seeing the newer versions, and they're stunning, they're gorgeous. I don't think they quite have the soul of the originals, but that's just my opinion. But I'll tell you one of the things that I just love and I think has stood the test of time, and that's the fabulous packaging that Sharon created and Hasbro at great expense, as you all know. But I just, looking at that original package art and those beautiful renderings and the style, I mean, even though it was very 80s in a lot of ways, it's just so beautifully done. And you don't see, you know, I'm still in the toy industry and I've been doing this for years, and you rarely see packaging that's that exquisite, beautiful, you know, with illustration. It's all photography, or it's cartoony anime kind of art. And so I just really relate to the beautiful packaging and the colors.
Yeah!
This is my first cup of coffee. Don't talk to me.
Hi, this question is for Christy, actually. I think we all kind of, looking back, feel that Gem was kind of ahead of its time.
Yes.
As far as it being kind of technologically challenging. So given that in today's world we have the internet, we have, you know, instant information at our fingertips, if you were to write a Gem show today, what things would you change and how would they be different, how would they be the same?
So if I were to write like the animation series today, given that we now have the power of the internet and all the technology that we have, yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I worked over the years, I worked with a couple of different independent producers who wanted to make a Gem movie. And one of the raging discussions that we would have was what time period to set it in. You know, should we just try to make it an 80s movie? Do you try to update it? If you're going to update it, how do you update it? And so I thought a lot about how I would update it, because obviously you have to take all of the new technology into account. So I think probably I would just do a massive update on the technology aspect of it. just calling them holograms is a little bit too simplistic. So I'd probably do some kind of nice science fictional, something else update to the technology. And of course, you have to take into account how much the music business has changed. It has just changed radically. And so approaching the stories from that point of view, you have to take into account, you do have to take into account social media. I wouldn't make it all about social media the way they did in the movie. I think that there was just too much emphasis on just that aspect of it. But you have to take that into account and take into account how musicians are running themselves these days and how they're getting their music out there and everything from Spotify to whatever, you just have to take that into account. So it will just become part of the overall mesh and backdrop of the stories, but I think I would stay very much true to the basic setup and the characters the way they are and keep all of that. That essence can be the same. Because everything else is just the setting. And the technology is the setting, the technology helps move things along, but it's really about the characters. That's what it's about. That's the heart of what the show is about. And that doesn't change that much. I mean, just because you can call someone on a cell phone versus having to go and find a landline, I mean, yeah, sure, that does change how you structure a plot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change what the character interaction is. So that to me is the heart of it. That would stay the same.
Do you want to go first, Lori? Because I'm very benevolent.
You are so polite. Thank you. Many of us are collectors and really get excited about finding things that we know are the rarities that are out there. And I know sometimes, for those of you who've been to more than one of these, our display room is always a little different because different people bring things to share. But I'd like to know, from what you've seen either at this con or at previous JemCons, what have you seen that really blew you away that you didn't know about or that made some kind of an impact on you? Is there anything special you've seen out there?
I did not know there was a Gem Ramalama. And the funny thing is, it made me laugh out loud literally when I heard, because my nickname I had a co-writing partner in Los Angeles, and I was in many bands with, and he used to call me Samaramalama. That was my nickname forever. Samaramalama. And then I was like, no, they have a Gem Lama, like a Ramalama, like that's too crazy. That's just insane. So, yeah, that was one of the things.
I think I already commented on that yesterday as I did. When the fans first started telling me this thing existed, I thought they were just kidding. No, that's no.
And I'm here to tell you, we were not kidding.
I had never heard of this thing, ever. Like the information never got from her division all the way over to us in animation. There was no communication or crossover on that at all.
And it's so random too.
It seems random. I mean, when you hear Stefanie talk about it, and the idea of a world tour, and it makes sense, but that just shows you how much of a division there was. There was just a complete gap of non-communication whatsoever between the toy and what we were doing in the animation.
I would have had fun drawing that. It would have been weirder. Because I did the song sequences so I could go crazy.
So awesome. You can't have Jim riding a llama though, because you can't ride them.
Oh, but I've got a photo. I got the original photo that I showed you yesterday of if you saw it in my office, I don't know how well you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
But she was riding the llama. Can I answer the question?
Yes.
Before you ask another one? This is my first JemCon, of course, and so. But as far as new things, of course, I have announced many times that I never saw the animated series, so so much of that was new to me, and seeing the costumes, because I'm thinking these are gonna be the outfits and things that I'm familiar with, and I'm seeing all of these things from the animated series, and I don't recognize witches' hats, and anyway, that last act on the costume show just, whoa, I have no clue about that. But I was also quite impressed with the Integrity Toys versions of, I'd seen, on the internet, I'd seen a few pictures before, but to see the whole scope of them, how beautifully they were done, how beautifully detailed. Toys have changed a lot, and the way sculptors, designers have looked at things, a lot of it has had to do with, I think Robert Tonner, who was a doll sculptor and innovator, probably for the last 20 years or more, had a lot to do with that kind of collector doll look, where it took it beyond just your typical fashion doll and into a whole realm of realism and sophistication that we just didn't do for children, because that market is for adults, the adult collectors, not for kids. And so, I wonder how different we might have created Gem if we were doing it today. I don't think it would have looked quite like the sophisticated, because again, we were aiming to design for children, not for adults. But I think it still would have had a little different aesthetic than it does today. So anyway, that's just my contribution.
So I had a question. You touched upon the fact that you were working with some independent producers based on, am I wrong, that you were thinking of how Gem will be updated?
Yeah.
And what transpired with that?
What transpired with that is I just couldn't get Hasbro to talk to me. They actually had a couple of development guys in an entertainment branch, and I would email them, and my agent would call them, and he was just like stonewalling, just couldn't get anywhere.
That just makes no sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to piggyback on that question and another previous question in regards to maybe a modern iteration in terms of like what possible format could that be? I know of Jane Austen and a modern iteration of Pride and Prejudice that use like various social media and also webisodes. Could it be mini music videos again, or webisodes?
The question was about what format Gem could come back in, like as YouTube videos or webisodes or something like that. I guess it really just gets down to somebody would have to talk Hasbro into giving them the rights to do it in whatever format. John Chu had a really hard time, getting them to agree to let him do a super low budget movie. I don't know what the thinking is internally there, if there is any. So, sure, there's a lot of possibilities, but it's like, who's going to do it? Where is the money going to come from? I mean, there are a lot of practical questions that have to be answered, totally outside of anything creative. With the comics, they already had a very well-established mainstream publisher come to them with, okay, here's our team, and we want to publish these comics. I'm sure it didn't cost Hasbro anything, so what have they got to lose? So that's kind of the setup. You would have to have the resources, the money, the whatever, and then you would have to go to them and convince them to allow you to do it. And they would have to need some kind of motivation probably to allow that.
So with that new Netflix show, Toys That Made Us, do you think Hasbro would be open to having a Gem episode? Not just a little blurb during the Barbie episode?
So which Netflix?
The Netflix show, The Toys That Made Us?
Oh, Netflix, The Toys That Made Us.
So do you think Hasbro would be open to having a Gem episode?
I can't see it in the next few years. They only do, I think, 3 episodes a season, and they've had 2 seasons, and I'm pretty sure that My Little Pony, Cabbage Patch Kids, and I'm not sure what's going to be, but they're doing blockbusters. They're starting with blockbusters, and I would love if they did it, but I would think it would be a few years down the road because they're going to be hitting.
I can speak to that, actually.
What's that?
I can speak to that, actually.
So in my crazy JemCon promotional tour outreach, I did actually get in touch with the producer of The Toys That Made Us, invited him to JemCon, let him know we have these amazing guests who also worked on a ton of other properties who they could interview for other episodes. They are interested in doing a Gem episode. They know about the Gem fandom. They wanted to come this year. There was a schedule conflict. They're already shooting for next year, but lines of communication are open for next year.
The problem we're seeing is that Hasbro seems to have a hard time finding a way to deal with this intellectual property. So their main goal is to sell toys. And kids nowadays seem to play less and less with toys, especially with dolls. So my question is to Stefanie, do you think there's actually still room for Gem and how, like, marketing-wise should be addressed to work? Because Hasbro has been trying, and I know for sure that it's been at least 7, 8 years that they've been trying to do it, but they don't seem to get anywhere.
Do you mean bring back the dolls? Is that what you're speaking
Yeah,
about?
because I mean, we're talking about a new show, a new TV, but their main goal is selling toys, and whatever will make them sell toys, they will do it. Whether it's webisodes, like we were saying before, or a live-action show, or a cartoon, but the main goal is that will these dolls sell again? What would have to be done differently in today's market, which is really different from games?
That's a really tough question. There's a part of me, of course, that says, yes, come on, why not? There's another part of me that says that the toy industry and children have changed in the last 30 years. And because children are playing with toys at early, starting earlier and stopping playing with toys earlier, I think Gem is a more sophisticated toy line than possibly Hasbro might be interested in producing. Their target market age is 3 to 5 now. I mean, that's primarily, we used to call that preschool, but that's now the main age, and 3 to 5 is really quite young for Gem. Older girls would love it, of course. And I mean, revolutionary-wise, it would be awesome to produce this new line of Gem dolls. It would appeal to a little bit older girls, which would I guess have kind of a twofold mission. One would be to introduce new girls to this fabulous world of Gem, and the other would be to have older girls find it cool to play with dolls again. And it's a big gamble. That's a big gamble. That it's easier to do, an entertainment property, which is, I wish I could tell you the percentages, but it's extremely high. When you have a line like My Little Pony, that's an evergreen brand. That's a brand that Hasbro developed, 35 years ago, and eventually it spun off and it's become a licensing, bonanza for many companies who produced My Little Pony lunchboxes and all of the other licensed paraphernalia. But even to develop My Little Pony today without, a movie and entertainment industry already built up around it is really, really difficult. Smaller toy companies are much more likely to take the gamble. Of course, Hasbro owns Gem, so, it's a matter of licensing and purchasing a license and things like that. So my personal opinion is, and I could totally be wrong, this is just my opinion, I don't see it happening with Hasbro, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen with another company. just because Hasbro, Mattel, you know, the larger toy companies are really all about being safe. You know, they don't really want to take a chance on something that they, you know, they don't want to invest a lot of money and you know, they've got a lot of overhead and with their companies. And so, you know, doing something that's not going to be a blockbuster hit is a big gamble for them. So, you know, maybe the answer is yes and no. Maybe not Hasbro, but maybe they would relinquish the rights or sell the rights to another company, and it could be just what everybody dreams.
Do you think the Disney princesses are geared for the
Much younger, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons, yeah. I mean, I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter, and she's been into Disney princesses for many years, so yes.
Yeah, we have a 3-year-old who loves the Disney, she loves them princesses.
Yes.
Princesses.
He hasn't had his coffee.
In the back there?
This is mostly for Christy, but a little bit for Samantha too. I don't know if you've ever done this or if you would consider it. I know, again, it's going to be probably involvement with Hasbro and all that, but you've talked a lot about the Gem Bible. Have you ever done like a companion book for Gem and kind of put down like all the accessory characters and all the little ins and outs?
Well, the Gem Bible covers all of that.
But is that available commercially?
Yeah.
Like for us to buy?
Yeah, I do make it available on my website. I try to be kind of low-key about it, but...
Okay, hold on.
It's a hidden page. It's a hidden page. That's what I mean by being low-key about it. You know, just years and years ago, I started making the Bible and my gem scripts available to people, and there was someone that used to work at Sunbow who got upset with me about it. Not somebody at Hasbro, but someone from Sunbow, and I couldn't really understand why she had that level of upset, but for some, and this was a lot of years ago. I'm talking maybe 20 years ago. But just because I didn't want to have her upset at me, I made it a very quiet, low-key kind of thing, and I made it basically a hidden page. And then I would just give the information out to people that asked about it. So,
And now you know.
I was trying to guide someone to the page this morning, and it wasn't coming up. So I should double check and make sure there isn't something. I was having a little bit of problems with my website the other day, and I just want to make sure that there isn't something wrong with it.
Stefanie, we need your help. Maureen Aragon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, for Samantha, like a lot of celebrities did, like.
I'll check on the page right now, see if I can get it to work.
Yes, please.
Hi, going on there. Like Carrie Ellis did a whole thing about the Princess Bride and his memories.
I'm sorry, honey, I missed the first part of your question.
Like how I was tying you into the whole question of the book was a lot of celebrities have done kind of remembrances, like Rob Lowe did stories I only tell my friends, and Carrie Ellis did a whole thing about the Princess Bride, and he actually brought in a lot of the actors from Princess Bride, and they have little segments throughout.
Yeah.
So would you consider doing anything like that? Your remembrances of Jem? And
Yeah. In fact, I've been asked that a lot more over the last 3 or 4 years. I think because I'm doing a lot of shows and I do a lot of panels. And I was actually talking to Keith and Suzanne, his wife, about it yesterday. I had quite an interesting childhood singing in Africa and like having armed escorts, because it was when Mugabe was taking over, so we had armed escorts like driving us through the bush to shows and crazy, crazy stuff that made us eventually flee back to England. But yeah, I've got quite, the show business is just such a crazy, wacky, different for everybody ride, and I really would love to start putting something together to tell y'all what it was like back in the day. Just to reference real quick, I brought with me, God, it was like the caper of trying to get the lost tapes, like the what is that episode? The master tapes. Yes, I was on a mission recently in California. And my dad was like, I bloody don't know where everything is. And I'm like, I know you have them. I need to get them because they're gonna like disintegrate into nothing, and then I will have nothing. And I literally like tore through his shed to find like my old McDonald's commercials and my just all of these precious things to me that, you know, I could never ever find again. And I have like 10 of my little records, my very first record that I made vinyl when I was 8, and I was promoting it all over Southern Rhodesia when I was a kid. And I'm keeping 5. I'm learning from you collectors. I'm keeping 5 for myself. I'm making them available to the fans because it is part of my history, and I'm so glad that I found them, that my dad had them. So anyway, I segue, but yeah, long answer to your question, I'm starting to feel the need to like tell my story a bit more, so.
It could be a movie.
It could be a movie. I did start work on a Jem memoir, and as some of you probably know, and there was an extremely clever fan who came up with Jemoir. Yeah, so we're calling it for that name. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but so I've been calling it the Jemoir. And I was working full-time at Zynga, so I really didn't have a lot of spare time to work on it. I got the first few chapters done, and basically it's going to be very much just a personal memoir about my life, becoming a writer, all the influences that led up to creating Jem, and then focusing on the creation of Jem and working on Jem. So I am currently working on a revised second edition of this other book that I wrote, which is Writing for Animation, Comics, and Games. It's a how to craft book on writing for those 3 forms. And the publisher asked me to do a second updated edition, so that's what I'm currently working on. That's due in October. And I really need to get a lot more done. But as soon as I have that off my plate, the Jemoir is like the main thing I want to get back to, and really get working on that. And I did already get clearances from Hasbro to use some of the photos. So. I have the website, the webpage up. So my website is just christymarx.com, so that's easy. And then it's /TO list. TO stands for Totally Outrageous. There was, I don't know if you guys remember Leslie Aishelsman. She had the Totally Outrageous mailing list that I was, and that was how I have been interacting with fans for like decades, literally like 30 years or something on that mailing list. But she finally got to be too much for her to maintain, so it's now archived. So anyway, TO stands for Totally Outrageous List, / and then Jem, and SX, which is my shorthand for scripts, .htm. So I'll read that again. It's christymarx.com /TO list / gemsx.htm. And I've been thinking very seriously about starting a Patreon page, and I was thinking that I would offer discounts on buying scripts and books and things like that for people that become patrons on my Patreon page. So you might want to kind of like wait a little while and wait for that if you want to.
Care Bear has a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
This question is for Christy Marx. I've heard a lot about the character graphics that was supposed to be in the show but never was. And this character has been a topic of a lot of discussion in the fandom because nobody knows if she was going to be a 5th misfit or a part of the Misfits entourage or part of the Stingers entourage. Could you tell me a little bit about Graphics' role and what she was supposed to do?
Yeah, Graphics was basically just supposed to be another kind of a troublemaker character. I mean, he's supposed to be a graffiti artist. I don't think he was around then, but I mean, basically she would have been a Banksy, you know, that kind of a character. So since we never really ended up using her, she didn't become that well defined. I wrote her as kind of a valley girl because that was the thing in the 80s, you know, the whole valley girl thing. And just that she would do graffiti and make trouble, and she didn't get really super strongly pegged to any one group or another. But that was mainly just because, although I wrote a little biography, we didn't get to use her in anything because very quickly she got dropped from the toy line. So you know, she didn't get a really strong association one way or the other, but it probably would have been an association with either the Misfits or the Stingers in some particular way or another.
I think graphics, you know, I was involved with, the doll was designed in my group by Kathy, and she sat next to me, and I loved, you know, her original prototype model. And I think one of the things that was, she was excited about doing graphics was just that it was so cutting edge design, and we were working on, or she was working on how to apply a decoration to the hair, because there was going to be design in her hair, and so we were kind of investigating whether it was going to be, you know, pad printed or, you know, spray painted with a mask, you know, or how that, and I believe that's what she did with the prototype. And her outfit, from what I recall, was vinyl with really white with bold graphics on it, and you know, it was one of my favorites to just see the prototype. I wasn't involved with the design. I was just kind of a, you know, excited observer, and of course saw the original prototype, and I'm sure it wasn't it in the pre-Toy Fair catalog for 87? It was never.
Do you know why she got dropped?
Because the line was dropped. I mean, that was.
Well, but she got dropped before. We still did a bunch of episodes around the
I have, you know,
I
remember that she was developing it in 87, so that's, you know, that's when everything was just kind of put on hold. So I don't, how long did the show go on?
Well, we did a whole season of stuff with the Stingers, so it went on through 88.
Yeah, so, you know, by that time, internally, the doll line was dropped or was on hold. So that's why it didn't go through further.
Because I had pictures of the prototypes of graphics and the Stingers and all of that, but I never got produced.
With the graphics, she got dropped because she was a misfit, and they were dropping the misfits because of the lack of sales.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, again, there are decisions that get made on the toy side.
I don't remember specifically hearing anything that they were dropping the Misfits. I think that the whole line, I mean, everything was put on hold, and, you know, even the ones that were, you know, approved to go forward, like, you know, Regine and whoever else. I don't remember all the characters.
Astral,
yeah. Too many questions.
Let's get some other questions here.
Okay, from my point of view, at the time of Gem, they were doing toys and series to promote the toys. And now it's more that we do a movie and then make side product for this movie. But
That's really true. I mean, it is kind of in reverse. But as I guess it was Christy mentioned yesterday, Hasbro was not allowed to advertise Gem toys during the Gem programming, but they were able to advertise their other programs. However, Hasbro now has, well, I guess it still has her own network.
Not anymore.
Oh, I guess they had it for a few years and it went away, but they were able to kind of do whatever they wanted to with that. But yeah, and I think that that's not to the advantage of children. You know, I'm a toy person, and so my interest is children. And my interest is in what's best for kids and what's at their best interests. And, you know, I have no problem with great movies and TV and entertainment. I have no problem with great toys. And if they meet, that can cause a lot of problems, because then you find that your toys are just supporting an entertainment property rather than having play value in and of themselves. And so I kind of like to see a little bit less licensing and a little bit less of that, and a little bit more innovative play. And, you know, if Mattel and Hasbro and Disney want to do all of these partnerships and have the toys just support the movies and their entertainment properties, that's fine. But I'm kind of in the business of all toys and children, and really developmental issues and social and play and, you know, fun and all of those things for kids. And you know, I want the toys to be fun, not just support some entertainment property. So,
yeah. But it's a fluid process, because it's not anything new. I mean, there's always been this you know, back and forth synthesis, push-pull between any kind of, whether it's TV or film or whatever, and say comics and say animation and all these other forms. And so, I mean, Connects, there's the toy company Connects, they hired me at one point to develop a bunch of IP for them to go with their toys. But on the other hand, you have, I mean, the classic story of all time, George Lucas, when he made Star Wars, he kept the ancillary rights because the film studios didn't think it was going to be anything. And that made him, you know, a multi-millionaire. And after that, the studios woke up and went, holy crap, we can't do that again. You know, so, you know, and so they're much more careful about the ancillary rights, because they suddenly realized how much it can be worth in all of its different forms, not just action figures, toys, but, you know, everything. So, I mean, that's just that's something that's always been there. What we need is a Samantha Newark action figure.
well, going back to, you know, entertainment and relationship with toys, even though you know, things have evolved and changed, and it basically used to be that at least back in the 70s and the 80s, the cartoon series, and I really don't know which is the first one, whether it was Strawberry Shortcake or Care Bears, or, you know, probably in the late 70s, and it kind of exploded in the 80s and 90s. But Walt Disney was really the first person, as far as I know. There may have been some small licenses, but back in the 30s, you know, this is a long time ago that the first Mickey Mouse stuffed toys and things were released to the public, and those were definitely designed to support his entertainment industry. They didn't have particular play value in and of themselves, other than just being, oh, I've got this Mickey Mouse stuffed toy. There were some you know, things that had, you know, as the years progressed, they had, you know, mechanisms and things like that. But it was all part of a big, you know, plan for the growth of the Walt Disney Company. It was not necessarily just designed so children would have a wonderful toy to play with. So it has been going on for a really, really long time.
And what about something like Cupid dolls? Don't they go way, way back?
They do.
And they started out
They were
like
a little cartoon.
Yeah, they started out as like
a newspaper cartoon. Yeah, Cupid dolls. So yeah, they've been around for a long time. You know, I mean, Shirley Temple dolls were mutually beneficial. You know, little girls could buy a Shirley Temple doll and then go to the movies and see their favorite Shirley Temple movie. So it has been going on a long time, but it's just so pervasive today. It's so much bigger even than it was in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. That's good, that's good.
I have a question for Christy. If the show would have continued, what storylines would you have liked to develop and wrote on for an episode?
I could wait all of that. If the series had developed, why don't we continue?
If the series had continued for longer than it did, which storylines would you have liked to written on?
Oh, had we gotten picked up and gotten some more episodes, and what storylines would we have done? I mean, somewhere along the way, eventually you'd have to resolve the whole Jem, Jericho, Rio triangle. I mean, that you can't drag that on forever. At some point. Actually, after the series was canceled, I was a little bit burnt out at that point, so I didn't actually mind necessarily having a break from it. But then, as the years passed, I began to think about what I would like to do to bring it back. And I actually went to Hasbro, and I think it was in around 2003, with a written proposal, and tried to get them interested in doing a reboot. bringing the characters back and doing some interesting things with them. I can't say specifically what, but again, I just got nowhere, trying to get them interested in doing that. But I thought we could pick up the characters again and show what's happened to them in the meantime, and do some interesting stuff, developing their further lives and dealing with the whole thing with Rio. But I just had no luck.
This is for Stefanie, if you were successfully able to reboot the Gem line for the older girls, like maybe 7 to 10, how would the look be? Because now you have to compete with Bratz dolls and Monster High dolls where everything is low and high, and would they sexy her up, which I would hate to see happen?
I would like to hope that they wouldn't do too much to make her look so stylized as, say, Monster High or some of the other more modern dolls. But Barbie, for whatever you think of Barbie has still maintained approximately the same proportions. Her face has changed slightly. Her sculpture, I think, some of the later dolls have just been exceptionally beautiful. And they pulled that off. So I mean, if I were involved with it, I would try to keep her maybe halfway between the current Gem and the more modern Gem as far as the doll design. Maybe not quite so sophisticated. And I love the size. The original size, the larger doll size, and it made a statement. There's a lot of doll sizes now. Doll clothes for Bratz aren't going to fit a Barbie because their proportions are different. So who cares? So if I were running the world and running Hasbro, which I'm not, I would try to maybe a little bit of a compromise. Update the faces a little bit, update the proportions a little bit, but not a lot. Not deviate too much. How about in the back? With the cute hat.
So follow up to that, because in the cartoon the aesthetic was so 80s, and we sort of been, like, the way that fashion is used now is so different than it was before, and sort of have like the forgotten fashion in the 90s and whatever's going on now. What would you be inspired by to design them now? Because it couldn't be the 80s because it would look like an artifact, right?
So he was wondering what if you were designing them now, what aesthetic you would be using, because 80s would be no longer appropriate, and styles and designs have changed so much.
Well, I'm not a fashion person, and so honestly, that would be kind of fun to direct, but maybe not for me to design, because I don't really follow fashion, and there are a lot of toy designers and doll designers that do. So, you'd want to have some of the best designers out there who really keep up with, because it's all about music and fashion, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the essence? And of course, relationships, but that's you're not going to get that with the dolls necessarily. You've got your backstory. So I just think, I still think it would need to have the fun hair colors, the fantasy, because even with Disney princesses, you've got fun hair colors and fun color. I mean, little girls and little boys love bright colors, and so it would be all about color and pattern and kind of a fantasy element, but not in the science fiction and fantasy realm, but more in the aspirational realm of rock music or popular culture and fashion, and kind of a sophistication that little girls could aspire to. And I guess that's a little bit like Bratz was originally designed to do. She had a passion for fashion. That was her, her story. And so you kind of do that, but you add that more fantasy element with fun hair colors and makeup, and I mean, that's still viable. Those things aren't just 80s. Sure, there's no shoulder pads today, and maybe some of the geometric, maybe some of the geometric, would have to be changed, to correspond with our aesthetic and stuff, and what little girls like. But I still think the theming and the basic ideas of, a band, I still think girls think that that's cool. Although music has changed, the MTV isn't the same as MTV was back in the 80s, and music videos and things. I mean, they may not have access, but girls younger and younger are going to rock concerts, you know that. I mean, little girls who are 7, 8 years old are going to their first concerts. I didn't go to my first concert until I was 17, and I think I saw the Doors.
Well, it's so much. There's that T-shirt that says, "I may be getting older, but I saw all the cool bands."
I did.
Me too.
I grew up in LA, so I got to see all the cool bands.
Me too.
Yes.
For you, Stephanie, I wondered, since you spoke a little bit about how the design process is obviously geared towards these children, the children as an audience, what is it like for you to come to something like JemCon and see like a whole bunch of adult collectors still enjoying these dolls today?
Oh my gosh, it blows my mind, honestly. And I explained to you guys yesterday when I was doing my presentation that as designers, we're so involved with so many things. We don't just, I'm sure there are, like, if you're a Barbie designer, you're just doing Barbie. That's the Barbie group, that's just what they do. They don't, they're not out there doing any other Polly Pocket or any other thing, they're doing Barbie. But for the rest of us out in the real world designing, especially for a company or even freelance, we're working on so many different projects, many times at the same time. And so when you do something, when you hit on something that becomes a success, even if it doesn't seem to be successful at the time, because Gem really was only out for 2 years, right? I mean, the toys were out for 2 years, and to us, it seemed like a failure. I mean, it was devastating to have Gem canceled because we were really invested in it, and I was not doing Gem full time. I was doing other lines that were, and all of us were working on multiple lines, but Kathy, for example, was doing more on Gem than I was. But we were still devastated, but it never occurred to me, ever in a million years, that Gem was, of all the toys, would be such a success. Just like when I designed the WWF Wrestling Buddies, and that boys toy, when I came in and did that ended up being a huge blockbuster toy, and now the collectors are coming to me out of the woodwork, and they want my prototypes, and they're willing to pay lots of money for those prototypes. But I hashtag when I have an Instagram page, and I hashtag Wrestling Buddies, for example, for something that I posted. And so the other day I went and checked just to see, and I thought, oh, there's probably going to be pictures of Wrestling Buddy toys, but there's probably also going to be pictures of like people wrestling each other. This is my buddy and we wrestle, so like maybe 2 little brothers or something like that. And so I clicked on the hashtag and it opened up, and it was just like scrolling on and on. It was all these guys who collect Wrestling Buddies, and they're all your age, right? They're all.
You're lucky there wasn't a lot of porn in there.
But that was, there have been a few surprises, and actually plug for Wrestling Buddies. Time Magazine declared Wrestling Buddies one of the top 100 toys of all time. So that was very exciting. So to answer your question, it's just been awesome, amazing, and I never in a million years dreamed. A lot of the things that I thought were going to be like, evergreen brands and do really well. Some of those have not, stood the test of time. But to see how you guys are so invested in the stories and the characters And honestly, you know, I'm sure that you all like the dolls, but I would say the vast majority of you, it's the animated series, because that's what has brought these characters to life for you. And really, isn't that what it should be? That's what animation should be. It should be to bring to life, you know, these wonderful characters and these stories. And, you know, I'm just glad to have been part of it. And so thank you guys for being so awesome. Yes.
So I have a question for Christy. So I was wondering if there's any grounds to the rumor that you've been pushing for Rapture to not be straight in the show?
Grounds to the rumor that I was pushing for Rapture not to be straight. It wasn't something we ever thought about for animation, because you just couldn't. It was one of those unspoken rules that was not a topic you could touch upon. So no, I never thought about
Because
that.
I've heard rumors about it. I've heard rumors about it.
I heard rumors about that. I was scared of call when you said if there was any character that would not be straight, it was Rapture. But I mean, hey, there's like lots of things.
But yeah, God knows when I threw that out. I don't remember.
We're going to be fodder for
2008 in LA.
I mean, I quite okay. I always saw and what Kelly did in the IDW comic book with Kimber and Stormer. I saw that as a natural thing.
Yeah.
That just seemed a very natural progression. That was something I already had in the back of my head anyway. So I wasn't at all surprised to see that she did that.
In casual passing, I was very excited to hear that Keith worked on something rather obscure, the 13 episodes of the Laser Tag Academy. So that it was exciting to me to learn. And I'm wondering, because each of you have worked on so many different things, what that hasn't come up yet in casual passing that might not otherwise, what kinds of obscure little things might you have done that you don't think that much about, but we might get really excited to hear and be surprised by?
The Spanish Inquisition?
Well, just to say, for instance, I feel like this question came up for Samantha a few years ago, and I feel like you said something about like a doll. I may be misremembering, so that's why I'm asking again, but is there something, I know you've done video game work that we might not know until we hear you. Are there things like that that haven't come up that we'd find interesting that we don't know about yet?
So many of you guys already know my story, but for the people that have never been to JemCon, I'm a singer myself, and I've been hired to sing on a lot of PlayStation games. So like God of War,
There you go, that's what I mean.
So you know, like the ethereal kind of Lisa Gerrard, very wailing, no lyrics. Yeah, that's me. Like Twisted Metal Black, the same kind of thing, and I did all the English versions for Wild Arms 3, all the English versions of the Japanese songs. I was hired to sing those, and then I did this. Actually, the music was really cool. It was a movie the movie was not so great, but the movie was called Crazy Six, and it was with Burt Reynolds and Ice-T and Rob Lowe and like all these people, and it was like Eastern Bloc crime story. And this is weird because I got to be the singing voice for the actress, the on-camera actress that was played a singer in the movie in these sad little clubs, and she would play her keyboard and sing, and I was her singing voice, and I was all over the soundtrack. So yeah, it's called Crazy Six if you ever want to. I think it's on DVD.
Yeah. Oh God, well, I'm trying to think of what is the most obscure animation series I ever worked on, or at least feels. Pardon?
Reboot.
No, that's not obscure. No, Reboot is not obscure. I would not say that at all. I would say probably Dino Riders.
I worked on that. They keep talking about wanting to make a movie since Jurassic Park.
Oh, really? I mean, I'd actually forgotten that I ever worked on it and just stumbled across it by accident one day not too long ago, and I'm like, Did I write that? I don't remember writing that.
The Rulon Empire.
He remembers.
I guess it's my turn. About the time I got into the toy industry, or maybe just shortly before, I started illustrating for children's magazines, and actually, when I was a child, I always wanted to be a children's book illustrator from the time I was a little girl. If I read a book and I didn't like the illustrations, I would draw my own and stick them inside the pages, and it always kind of irritated me. The Nancy Drew books only had one illustration at the beginning, and so I would just do my own and stick them in the pages. But there was I mentioned that I'd been an advertising illustrator and storyboard artist for 10 years before I got into the toy industry, but I kind of discovered children's magazines, and I illustrated, starting in 1984, I think. I started illustrating for a syndicate of children's magazines called I can't remember the name of the syndicate. It was Turtle, Humpty Dumpty, Children's Playmate, Children's Digest. They also published Jack and Jill, but I didn't illustrate for Jack and Jill. And so I illustrated for them maybe the first 10 years or so that I was in the toy industry. It was just freelance. But I have a funny little story. So in 1991, end of 1991, I was working for Tonka. And Tonka was bought by Hasbro. And so they shut us down. And I was extremely pregnant. My daughter, the last day of our work was December 31st, 1991, and Annie was born November 17th. So actually, because I was still on the payroll, I was able to have a maternity leave, and I came back to work. My first day back was December 31st, 1991, so that I could, get my benefits and everything. But I had been working on a deadline. Of course, I was, working in the evenings after work, and I had this deadline to get this illustration done by November. I think the date was November, 20th or something like that. Well, I went into labor, and I'm working on the illustration, and I'm sitting, it's in the evening, and I have a little TV tray with all my markers, because that was the day of markers and Prismacolor, and so I'm doing this rendering, and I'm going in labor, and I'm going, I've got to finish this illustration. And I never told the art director that I was pregnant. I just, because it's like, why muddy the waters, so I never told him I was pregnant. So I'm doing this, and I'm going, I've got to get this thing finished, but the pains are coming in my waters, bro. I'm sitting there finishing it, and then when it became very obvious that I was not going to get it finished before I went to the hospital,
then he was like, screw this, I'm coming.
So my husband, takes me to the hospital, and I have the baby, unceremoniously late that night, and then the next day he brings me over all of my supplies. And so, how they have the little tables that pull over the bed, so here I am, and I'm drawing and finishing, and I met my deadline. Anyway, I illustrated for children's magazines. I think the last one I did was maybe 2004 or 5. I'd still do it, but it's, I'm just kind of doing other stuff, but I always enjoyed doing that.
I love
obscure stuff. I don't know. There's, I don't know how obscure, but I did a bunch of storyboards for a couple of games, versions of Crash Nitro. Anybody hear of Inhumanoids or Robotics? Just a few years ago. I can't remember how many years. I need more coffee.
Somebody bring that in.
God, I could keep going, but I don't know how obscure. I'm trying to think of obscure. Well, there is the Addams Family cartoon, which was extremely fun to work at Hanna-Barbera on that. Sky Command another H&B thing. Yeah, who are you gonna call? You know? I also did storyboards for the second season of G.I. Joe, and the three of us were asked to do the title, and I asked for the Hasbro toy line for the next year, so they sent me, you know, the thing with Jem on the cover.
The Toy Fair catalog.
Yeah, and I went through looking at what they were going to market the next year, and I put it all in my title, and they went with mine. You know, I could rattle on for a long time. I did a lot of stuff, but that's enough for now.
This question is for Christy. I've heard a lot of rumors about there was a planned Jem movie back in the 80s. Do you know anything about that, or what was the?
I think what you're talking about is they wanted to make an animated Jem movie.
Yeah.
Hasbro was doing a bunch of animated movies at the time, and then they did a G.I. Joe animated feature, which they put out, which bombed.
I didn't work on that.
And because it did so poorly, they canceled all the development that I was doing. I had written what would be called a treatment, basically an outline for an animated movie, but it never went anywhere.
In the back. We've kind of talked about like trying to bring Jem back in various ways, but I was thinking with Christy, with your background with Zynga, what about video game options? Because there's a lot of games right now with female properties that have like fashion things where you can like make all these different cool outfits on them. And if you even go back to like back in the day when I was a kid, Journey had their own video game where they had to escape and rivalry. And like you could do a lot of fun things around that, and that might be more appealing to kids today.
Yeah, I actually talked to people at Zynga about trying to do a Jem video game, but again, it gets down to a matter of licensing the rights and whether they think it's worth it. And unfortunately, Jem isn't the kind of property that most game companies would bother to license. I hate to say it, but that it's just the reality. They don't see it as being a big enough market to make it worth acquiring the rights. And there are, some game companies focus on licensing rights, but a lot of game companies would rather just, create their own stuff, which they own, and they don't have to pay for it, that kind of thing. But yeah, when I was at Zynga, I did actually talk to some people and try to generate a bit of interest, but it didn't work, no.
Yes, I need to run to the ladies' room real quick.
We're not ending the panel, there's still time. If you have hosted JemCon, so Stefan, Alana, Maria, Damon, Kat, Shavana, Liz, Lori, if you have hosted JemCon, we are doing a group photo in front of the Jem backdrop. So please go near the JemCon backdrop for a group photo.
We still have time.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Back.
Stefan, you too.
Just a follow-up to what you just said, Christy. This is my third JemCon, and I feel this question always comes up, especially in light of the movie not being terribly successful. And especially with Dobby Day's music video that was really well done that we saw yesterday. What can we as fans, some of us older fans, some of us newer fans, do to make, it's not going to be something that's extremely commercially successful or anything like that, but it's something that we can do to compel the market to be interested in Jem again, in the way that it won't be the same as the cartoon or whatever, but in a way that can produce new products and new television things or video games or whatever the products are.
Yeah,
what could we do?
How could the fans drive something new in the Jem arena? There are lots and lots and lots of Jem fans out there because every time I turn around, I'm encountering people who know about Jem, but it has to be it just has to be a big and powerful voice. I mean, big enough to make someone at Hasbro actually sit up and pay attention. And they pay attention to G.I. Joe because it's such a massive fan base, or Transformers, which has a massive fan base. And we are small but mighty. I mean, we're dedicated, but we don't have the massive kind of numbers that they pay attention to. So I really don't know if there's a way to overcome that or not, but you would just have to like expand and get more and more people involved and try to create a bigger base of voices so that it sounds like there's just a lot more power behind it, you know, to convince somebody to do something.
But remember that Hasbro, you know, is making toys for children, and so I think that if the G.I. Joe fan base, which is also adult, primarily men, I think if today they were trying to en masse get Hasbro to produce a defunct line, you know, pretend G.I. Joe wasn't successful, it might not be as successful because the adult fan base isn't necessarily going to drive a company to create toys for children, and so there's a disconnect there, and so you would have to convince Hasbro that this is a viable child's property, not, you know, adult collectible, because that's not their business. So I think it's a tough go, and it's always worth trying. But I think there's got to be a way to make it really viable for children, something that they would be as fascinated with. And if it means that the aesthetic has to change to be kind of like some of those other toy lines that you may not think are all that cool, maybe that would be the way they would do it. Maybe it's little minifigures, you know, of Gem, or something that's not going to be a huge outlay of money for them. It's less of a risk and a gamble. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's adult fans that are going to drive a toy company to revitalize a line.
Yeah, not to revitalize a toy line necessarily, but you know, just
as an entertainment property.
Yeah.
But they're probably not going to do an entertainment property unless there's a toy tie-in that they can really promote.
Yeah, unless someone's just coming to them and offering them, like the way the comic book, you know, came to them. Just,
yeah, exactly. You'd have to have something already there.
Pop figures.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like fun.
Sorry.
Oh,
hi. I had a quick question. The Funko Pops, is there a chance to start to be on one of the lines? Because that's what I thought was a rumor for that.
yeah, I thought I heard that
that would be awesome.
I thought I heard, I think I believe Alana was telling me earlier that there's a Gem and Pizzazz Funko Pop coming up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you can
that's the way to go. I mean, and if that were successful, it would certainly be an entry point. Right, look at this is doing well. But it's not going to be, you know, it's going to look like one of their pop figures. So.
So, knowing that Gem is owned, you know, technically it's licensed and owned by Hasbro, intellectual property has to keep being renewed. Do toy companies just have people that renew things that
Yes.
are very just blindly, or would there be a chance that the licensing could come up? And if so, would either of you consider taking over the intellectual property?
Believe me, corporations like Hasbro.
No, they're not
They're on top of stuff like that. Even if they may not think they're going to do anything with it in a million years,
Now,
they're not going to let it go.
That's not to say that it doesn't happen. I mean, Strawberry Shortcake, for example, has had the license for Strawberry Shortcake. It was originally Kenner, then Kenner was bought by Hasbro, so technically Hasbro owned it, but then it went to Playmates, and it's been to several other toy companies, and it was a very successful, you know, line. So, you know, it happens if the company feels that the license, that they can get more from selling the license than from maintaining it. But Hasbro, you know, it's hard to say. I suppose it's possible, but then you've got to find somebody who's gonna have your vision and you know, be able to maintain it as a strong toy line, not just a one-year wonder.
Yeah. You're talking about a lot of money too.
Yes, a lot of money.
So Alana, did I get?
I have questions. Okay, Okay, so.
No, but I want to confirm something that I said that you
Sure.
told me to make sure that I'm actually correct, that the Funko is going to be Gem and Pizzazz.
Well, you know what, yes, yeah. I mean, it's
Okay.
kind of unrelated, it's been leaked. It wasn't official, but it's been leaked, but please speak on it.
It's been leaked.
Did you want me?
No, she had a question, sorry.
It's been leaked, I have no official information.
Okay, no official
It's been leaked.
information.
The other question was like with hallmarks. I know John had the hallmark ornament. Would that be the same thing with pizzazz, possibly with hallmark?
I have no idea.
Yeah, who knows?
Tell them we want it. Everyone, we should flood these places. And tell them we want it, because the more we like push, because there are people that pushed for Funko, pushed hard. If we just keep flooding these people, they're gonna know. We have our voices, we need to make our voices heard. If we want it, we have to talk to these people, for sure.
I was just wondering, I'm sorry if I missed this. This question is for Stefanie. Of your involvement with the Gem and the Holograms line, did you have a favorite doll?
Oh, good question. Yes, I like Clash.
That was the first Gem doll I had.
I thought she was just amazingly sophisticated and cool looking.
Did you see the Clash cosplay yesterday?
Yeah. Yes, that was really awesome.
So colorful.
So, for the three of you, if you could redo, what would you redo? So for Stefanie, if there was a doll that caught your eye that you would want to revamp as you were responsible for the second generation hologram designs.
I would have revamped the first generation.
And if there was an episode or a concept, and Samantha, if you weren't Jem, Jerica, and Jamie, who would you have wanted? Jamie.
That was supposed to be yesterday.
Who would you have wanted a crack at?
Oh my God. I have to think about that for a second.
Take your time. Whatever you do. I don't know. I don't think I would redo any of it, quite frankly. I mean, obviously the structure of the first 5 half hours is a bit odd because of the way it all came about, but, you know, I suppose I could write it better since I learned more about writing as I went along, obviously, but I'm pretty happy with the way it all came out, so. Yeah.
I think I sort of would want to be Jetta because she's so sort of English and really sort of little rough around the edges, and like I just really like the way she talks, and I like to be her. That would be really fun. Because when I was in England, I had to talk like that. I was so very, very, very proper. But to be like sort of do this Spice Girls English, like a little rough, little wrong side of the track sort of thing, I really, 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 really like that.
I have a question for you, Samantha. So I'm new to JemCon.
Welcome.
Yeah, so I don't know a lot besides just the cartoon and the dolls. So maybe this question is out there, but since you sing, why are you not the singing voice of Jem as well?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot.
Yeah,
So
okay, so.
what happened was I got a call from my agent to audition for the voice actor roles, and the music counterparts were already cast. The whole machine was in New York. The writing, the singers had already been hired. So basically they were finding voice actors to match to their singing counterparts. So that came first, and then the voice actors. And nobody knew, like it was very slinky of them to it was, they did it perfectly, so none were the wiser. Yeah.
My question is about the media. Since if they want to do something affordable, I think maybe that Gem movie that was never made could be affordable because it's not a whole series, but would that maybe work without a doll line, or is that too much money for Hasbro?
Yeah, well, again, the only reason John Shue finally got the Gem movie made is because he told me he spent like 8 years working at them to try to convince them to let him do it. And then, he brought in like a super low budget production company to finance it. So, I mean, Hasbro didn't have to take a risk. It's all about taking a risk. They're not interested in taking a risk, so. What's that?
Well, to complete what you said about doing the voice of Jetta, it was not in French. The voice actress who did Jem and Jericho did Jetta.
Did Jetta?
With a lower pitch.
Really? I didn't know that. And I love Louise. We live in Nashville together. Although she's always, like her character, she's always jetting off somewhere. Let's all have dinner, the three of us. She's jetting, she's like, I'm in London, darling. I'm in London with my dad. I don't know if a lot of you guys do know this, but Jetta, Louise Dorsey, who's the voice of Jetta, her dad is Engelbert Company. And she's toured with him as a backup singer, and she's co-written a bunch of music for him over the years, and yeah. A little bit of trivia.
Question?
Hi, Stefanie?
Yes.
Could you guys have made it just a little bit easier to get those tights on the doll legs?
I think if you put a little talcum powder on them.
Getting the tights on the doll.
Yeah, that's right. You should see us girls trying to put them on, right?
I gave that up a long time ago.
That was like the worst part of the 80s, to be honest.
Okay, I don't know if I misheard this, or if I just dreamed that you said this, but Christy, did you say that you wrote scripts with graphics? Did you say that, or did I just think
Oh,
that?
no, I said we never did get
Okay, I
around
thought
to
you
writing.
said you did, and I was
Yeah,
like,
no.
I know that that's not a thing.
It never got far enough along. In fact, I don't think I ever even wrote any premises or anything like that.
okay,
for her. I
good.
think she got canceled pretty quickly, or pulled pretty
Okay.
quickly.
So I was like, I think I imagined that, but just make sure. Since the rumors get started. That's why I'm like, let me verify this so I know that that's not a thing. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't get very far along with doing anything with her, unfortunately. Although the comic book.
I thought it did. Sophie talked to you about that? Because I thought Sophie wrote online that she conferred with you about the graphics character.
Yeah, I've been exchanging emails with both Kevin
And that's
and
what I thought was
Sophie.
so cool. Because it was like you were I felt like I wanted to think you were inputting something. It was like the graphics we never had, the comic.
It's really their work. I didn't really input much, but we have chatted.
And then I was going to ask Sophie, like, Sophie, tell us about that. Both sides.
Alright, so I'm not sure if this has ever been touched upon at any JemCon panel or anything, but has there been a show, like cartoon, anything that you wished you had an opportunity to work on?
I would have loved to have been a part of Scooby-Doo. That would have been so much fun, because I grew up with Scooby-Doo. And when I actually was recording Gem, Welliver asked me one day, he's like, do you want to meet the voice of Scooby-Doo? He's coming to the studio for a session. I was like, oh, Scooby? He did the voice for me. He signed something for me, and it was awesome. I would have loved to have been like Daphne or something. I don't know. I would have been anything, but just Daphne. That would have been so fun.
I pitched on a couple of the different Star Trek series, and came like this close on both Next Generation and also on Voyager. I came so close to selling a pitch on those shows. I would love to have written for those shows, and each time it just didn't quite happen, but that would have been nice. I would have enjoyed that. Because I grew up on Star Trek, and so it means a lot to me.
Is there a character that you would have loved to add to the line if you were in the marketing business? Is there a character that never been produced but that you would like have to see?
Character that was never produced?
I mean, what if you were the director and you want to add a new character, what kind of character you would have? Kind of personality you never see in the other characters, there were, sorry.
So creating...
If you want to create a new character.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking about back in the day, what I would have thought, or now? Because I mean, back in the 80s, I was creating a lot of new characters, obviously. I was creating all the Starlight Girls and Eric Raymond and the Countess de Voisin and Harvey Gabor. I mean, you know, there were lots of characters I created, but I never had the freedom to create. Like I tried to make Techrack androgynous and I couldn't, so I never had the freedom to go there and do that kind of experimentation. So yeah, if I were doing it like now, or I think it would be possible to do a gay character, or you know, or someone who's androgynous or whatever, you know, and get into some of that cool stuff, that would be great. But
didn't you talk about a counterpart, like a nemesis to Synergy?
For the movie.
For the movie.
The movie concept did have something.
Like an AI intelligence that was
called entropy.
And
you can do such fun stuff with that now. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, now especially.
Yeah.
You know, because at the time, when you think about it, at the time, I mean, the internet, barely anybody even knew the internet existed. And as I said that yesterday, I was talking about Steve Gerber, who made us work on computers. And you know, my first modem was a 300 baud modem. And I don't know if any of you even understand what that means. You know? But we're talking dial-up, and we're talking, you know, monitor screens that are only monochrome, you know, green text on a black screen, and no visuals, no graphics of any kind whatsoever. And you know, it was all so extremely limited. But it's funny, when I was writing on the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends series, like some of the first animation stuff that I ever worked on, I did an episode called Video Man. And their characters got trapped in the world of the video games, which at that time consisted of Pong and, you know, really basic stuff. And then one day, while I was working at Zynga, Zynga was a really amazing place. It had this huge building that they owned, and a massive, you know, a screen that covered like a huge entire wall. And they had their own culinary department, so it was like for the cafe area. And one day I'm walking down and there's Video Man, the episode playing up on this giant screen. And I was thinking the incredible irony of that. You know, here I am working at Zynga, and we're making these incredibly complex games that you can play on a phone, and compared to what this is in this, you know, this episode. And never had I imagined when I was writing that episode that I'd be designing games for a company, you know, company like Zynga. So it's kind of amazing how that comes around.
Yeah, this is sort of tangentially related, but it's kind of sort of off topic. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the TV series Black Mirror, but there's
one.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird series, but one of my favorite episodes is the one that's 80s themed, San Junipero, which if you haven't seen that episode, I love it because it contains a lot of those elements. I don't want to do spoilers if anybody's interested in seeing it, but it's fabulous. I mean, there's a lot of it that's set in the 80s, and they do it really well. It's not cheesy, it's well done. And but there's also a lot of sci-fi elements to that episode. And it's not, usually that series is very dark, so if anybody don't watch it from like season 1, just go find that episode. But it reminds me of that because there's a lot of, like if you go back and watch it, just be curious, because like, there was a lot of elements that reminded me of Gem, elements of things like that.
I almost want to say, I think it's set in 87.
Yeah, it's set in 87. Yeah.
That was a very good year.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, when I thought of like a live action Gem, what that would look like, that episode really visually and just the sci-fi elements to me, a lot of it I was like, oh, this would be one way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it was really interesting because there's the Japanese pop star, whose name I can't remember, who is a hologram. She's just a completely holographic character, but she tours.
So
And she has an enormous fan following, and, you know, she's got the long, you know, the two enormous sort
Her
of
name
pigtails that
is,
are like this long.
Hatsune Miku.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't remember the name, but, you know, I mean, that's a phenomenon, I mean, that's just amazing. Was there something that you had to answer on that?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna, the question had been asked earlier, what properties would you have liked to have worked on? And as a designer, I think the first one that comes to, I mean, there's so many toy lines that I would have loved to have worked on, and there were some that I worked on that I kind of came in at the tail end. You know, like Rainbow Bride, I was on the last year of Rainbow Bride, and I would have loved to have worked on. But I think the one that I would have loved the most would have been Strawberry Shortcake. That would have, you know, to have developed all those characters, and that was such an early part of that 80s generation of toys, and anyway, I think I would have liked that. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Jem song?
I think we did the Jem song.
Yeah, they did Jem song.
What's your favorite Jem song?
There's
so many.
I kind of like the Misfits song Trapped because it has like this really rocking jazz beat and the wicked saxophone. It's not very much like any other song in the series.
Yeah, so many great songs.
I noticed you're holding a Care Bear, and I wanted to say something about Care Bears, and it's a little embarrassing. And you're the first people I've told this to, but before I got into the toy industry, I like to say it was maybe 1981, 2, in there, early 80s. I was a freelance illustrator in Los Angeles, and because I did a lot of children's art, and so a lot of my accounts were ad agencies that did children's stuff, and so I was approached by the ad agency for Denny's restaurants, and they wanted me to develop a line of children's trays, like plastic trays that were permanent, you know, that they could bring the children their meals, bibs, little plastic bibs, and menus. And so they, this was, I guess, maybe the first year, or Care Bears were just coming out, and I think the Denny's had got the license for Care Bears, and so they wanted me to put Care Bears on the artwork. And I took one look at it, and I'm sorry to say this, I said, those are not cute. And I refused to do the Care Bear character, and so I did my own bears, which were, I thought, much cuter. And they produced them. They didn't fight with me and say, look, we paid them, you know, X number of dollars for this license, and by golly, we're Denny's. So I still have my trays, and somewhere in my portfolio I've got a bib and a menu that they kept those going for quite a long time, used my art. But that was the first time I'd ever seen Care Bears, and I think they're cute because they've grown on me and I can see the nostalgia, but at the time from a design standpoint, I was not impressed. I did a lot of work for those characters from Cleveland, which is their licensing division.
Back in the 80s.
Back in the 80s.
Downtown Cleveland had all the Care Bears on every Christmas. They had lights everywhere.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I have a question, and forgive my ignorance if this has already been asked. I really apologize if so. But I wanted to know, looking back, if you could have done, with Jem, if you all could have done a crossover or even a spin-off with any of the characters. Well, that's actually a two-part question now that I think about it. If you could have done a spin-off with any other cartoon show, past or present, what would it be? And then the follow-up, if you could have done a spin-off with any of the characters, which one would it have been? Or group, which one would it have been?
Transformers.
Yeah.
And we even had the announcer guy on the TV, Hernando or whatever his name was. Hector Ramirez.
Oh, I never knew that character existed.
He was in Oh yeah, he was in G.I. Joe, and he was in Humanoids and Jem. It's already been crossed over.
It must have been because of Roger Slifer, maybe?
No.
Yeah, Roger.
Probably. But I'm trying to think of like, so you're thinking about like actually like a crossover between some of the Jen characters with some other series?
Yeah, I think that's what she means.
The question?
Any wishful thing,
Yeah.
I'm sorry I had to join.
I don't know, because Jem is such a different universe from the other things. Didn't Hasbro, I think, at one point come out with a kind of a weird one-off promotional comic that had Synergy interacting with some of their other properties.
That makes sense, yeah.
I don't know what this was done for. I don't know a lot
That
about
was when they were launching Hub, you're right.
They were launching Hub, yeah. And so Synergy was like was interacting with the Joes or something. I don't know. I didn't quite.
I think there were some comics at like San Diego Comic-Con. I think there were
Yeah,
some
I think they were like a
materials.
promotional piece. And I remember thinking like, that just doesn't seem right, you know? And so I was like, yeah. I don't know, she's so much in her own kind of a universe. I mean, having written Joe, there's a certain feel to that kind of action versus what we did with Jem. Jem was so completely character driven. Whereas the Joe stuff, even though, you do character stuff, it's a much more action and plot driven, really, when you get down to it, even though you want to have the character stuff in it. So I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a good mesh to me.
Well, but you could always just, for fun, I imagine Jerrica in Smurfland, in her blue and white striped out,
Actually, Jim could be doing a USO tour and the Joes are there. And then there could be some action sequences that happen that Jim has to save Duke.
If you guys haven't seen it yet, there's a fan-made short film called Truly Outrageous Jem fan film, and they do the Baroness from G.I. Joe. So they've got.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's cool.
Fun to draw.
I thought she was great.
I actually was offered a chance to write for the Smurfs. And they sent over the Bible, because the process is, they send you over the Bible and you read the Bible and then you pitch ideas. And I just read this and I just went, I can't do it.
I designed a couple of.
So smushy.
I designed a couple of poses for Penny. I guess it was Panini, but for Smurfs, they were hiring a bunch of animators to draw for them, and you'd have to come up with the situation. So I did 3 or 4 Smurfs that got made into toys.
Well, the one thing, at least we don't have to worry about costume design for Smurfs. It's rather minimal.
What about the spin-off part? What about the spin-off? Which character would you expand on the life of if you could continue the series? That's the second part of her question.
Well, you could do something really different and spin off the Starlight Girls into something.
Oh, yeah.
Because that could appeal to a younger set, a younger set of viewers.
They could be their own show.
Yeah. Could do something fun with that.
Okay, what's that episode? I'm sorry.
She's
My
got
only question is a comment, kind of like it's following up with what she said and something Samantha said. We all think that what would be really awesome is a Jem Scooby-Doo episode.
Like Supernatural just did.
I think Kirsten wants to come up with something, or even if you want to write with Kirsten, because obviously we love you.
That Supernatural episode was hysterical. That was just hysterical. That was brilliant.
Like that would be the funniest thing, just like to have that comedy, like going back and forth and the drama and all that, and like to find out it's the it was pizzazz and whatever.
Because they're all capers. It's so like caper driven.
Yes,
solve the mystery.
And actually, Jamie who said it, and when she said it, I was like, oh my gosh, that was the best thing. And then her question and I was like, all right, this guy.
And then we can have a benefit concert.
That was all I had. I really had no
Okay, so we've run out of time for the main session. Thank you again.